The first thing I heard when I pulled back into the driveway was my daughter-in-law's voice through the kitchen window. He'll sign before he realizes what it is. Clifton already agreed. I sat in the truck with the engine off. I did not move. Once we get the evaluation scheduled, the rest moves fast. The attorney said 60 days, maybe less. I'm Leonard Whitfield. I'm 67 years old, retired civil engineer, and I've owned this 220-acre farm in rural Tennessee for 31 years. My wife Norma built this place with me side by side until she passed 4 years ago. She taught elementary school her whole life and never once complained about a hard day. The farm, the equipment leasing business attached to it, all of it is her legacy as much as mine. Total value somewhere around $204 million. Not a number I think about much, it's just the life we built. I had been on my way to pick up a part for the baler. 10 minutes down the county road, I reached into my jacket and felt nothing. My engineering notebook, the one I keep in the inside pocket, was sitting on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. That notebook has 15 years of account numbers, insurance contacts, and equipment service schedules inside. I turned the truck around. Sylvia was alone in the kitchen. My son Clifton was out by the equipment barn. I'd seen him there when I pulled in. She was on her phone, voice low, and even the tone of someone running through a checklist. I did not go inside. I backed out of the driveway slow, same way I'd pull away from a spooked animal, no sudden moves, and I drove 3 miles to Gerald Owens' feed store. I parked in the back of the lot and sat there with the windows down. I'm an engineer. I spent 40 years solving problems by measuring twice and cutting once. You don't act on one data point. You document what you observe, you figure out what you don't know yet, and you build from there. Norma was the one who gave me the engineering notebook I carry now. She wrote on the first page herself before she handed it to me. Small, careful handwriting. Always document everything, Len. She had no idea how much I'd need that advice. I pulled out my phone and called Floyd Merritt. Floyd is a former county deputy who runs his own investigation business out of Knoxville. I'd used him once about 8 years back when some equipment went missing from a job site. He answered on the second ring. I told him what I heard. No editorializing, just the words and the context. He asked me 3 questions and said he'd start that afternoon. That evening I drove home like nothing had happened. Sylvia had made dinner. We ate together, the 3 of us, and I listened to her ask me how the part for the baler was coming along. I told her the supplier had to order it in. She nodded and said that was a shame. I went to bed that night and lay there running through everything I didn't know yet. Who the attorney was. What evaluation meant in legal terms. How long this had been in motion. Whether my son knew the full shape of what his wife was planning, or whether he was being managed the same way I was being set up. I did not sleep much, but I did not panic either. Panic is for people who haven't spent 4 decades on job sites where the wrong move costs more than time. Floyd called me 2 mornings later with the first layer of what he'd found. Sylvia's spa business had been failing for 3 years. She was $80,000 in debt across 2 suppliers who had both filed civil suits against her. Her personal credit was in rough shape. She had been hiding the worst of it from Clifton, who handles accounts for small businesses and is good at his job, but had trusted her completely with their own finances. That trust was the first door she walked through. The second thing Floyd found was worse. Before any evaluation had been officially discussed with me or anyone in my family, Sylvia had already met privately with a doctor. Philip Decker, a geriatric psychiatrist in Nashville, 3 separate times. Floyd pulled Decker's professional record. In the past decade, Decker had conducted 44 guardianship evaluations. 40 of them ended with a recommendation for full guardianship. The state average sits around 38%. Decker was not a doctor trying to protect elderly patients. He was a service for people who needed a specific outcome on paper. Sylvia had paid him $12,000 in 2 installments. Floyd also told me something I had not expected. My daughter Patricia, who lives in Atlanta and teaches high school, had been receiving phone calls from Sylvia for 2 months. Slow and steady, Sylvia had been feeding her a story. Dad seemed off at Thanksgiving. Dad repeated himself on the phone. Dad left the barn gate open and didn't remember it. Every detail was small enough to sound like concern. All of it designed to neutralize Patricia before a petition was ever filed, to make sure she would hesitate before pushing back. That part hit different, not because Patricia had believed it, I don't think she had fully, but because Sylvia had been sitting at my dinner table, looking me in the eye and running this operation the entire time. I wrote every number Floyd gave me into the notebook, then I closed it and thought about what to do next. My first instinct was to call Clifton and put everything on the table. Father to son, kitchen table, no games. I've always been direct. I don't like going around things when you can go through them, but Floyd had said something that stayed with me. If she knows you're onto her, she'll accelerate. File fast, get the evaluation done before you can counter it. You'll be playing defense from day one. So I did the thing that went against my nature. I waited, I watched, and I started building a file the same way I used to build project documentation, methodical, dated, nothing left to memory. The next morning I drove over to see Howard Beckett. Howard is 70, retired school principal, lives about 4 miles east of me on a property his father left him. We've been neighbors for 28 years. I've helped him patch fence. He's helped me pull a tractor out of the mud twice. That kind of neighbor. I told him what I'd found. Not all of it, just enough. He listened without interrupting, which is a quality you don't find in everyone. When I finished, Howard set his coffee mug down and said, "Leonard, that's almost exactly what's been happening to me." His son's wife had been pushing him for 6 months to sign a power of attorney. Just in case something happens, Howard. It's easier for everyone if it's already in place. Howard had been stalling without knowing exactly why, just a feeling that something was off about the urgency, the way it kept coming back up no matter how many times he said he wanted to think about it. Then he told me the part that tied it together. His daughter-in-law and Sylvia knew each other. They were both members of the same Facebook group, one of those family estate planning communities that sounds helpful until you look at who's actually in it and what they're actually sharing. I don't know the details of what passed between them in that group. I have my suspicions. Howard and I agreed to talk every evening at 7. 2 men comparing notes, keeping records, watching for anything that moved. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was the right work. A few days later, I called Patricia in Atlanta. I didn't lay out the whole case over the phone. I just said, "I need you to come home for a few days. Something is going on and I'd rather show you than try to explain it." She booked a flight for Friday without asking more than one question. When she arrived and I sat her down with Floyd's full report, she went quiet for a long time. She read every page. She looked at the payments to Dr. Decker. She looked at the timeline of Sylvia's calls to her, the dates, the pattern of it. Then she looked up and said, "Does Clifton know any of this?" I told her I didn't believe he knew the full shape of it. He knew Sylvia had money problems. He didn't know she had been meeting with a guardianship psychiatrist before anyone had breathed a word to him about concerns for my health. Patricia said, "Let me be the one to tell him." I stayed in the barn that Saturday afternoon. I didn't need to be in that room, and I didn't want to be. What Clifton was going to hear was going to hit him hard, and he deserved to hear it from his sister, not from his father, who was also the man Sylvia had been trying to take apart piece by piece. Clifton came out to the barn about an hour later. He stood in the doorway while I worked on a hydraulic fitting. His face had the look of a man trying to figure out where the ground went. He said, "She changed the password on our joint account 3 months ago. I thought it was a security update. I never followed up on it." He stopped. I should have followed up. I said she was careful. "That's not the same as you missing it." He was quiet for a minute. Then he asked what I needed him to do. I told him, act normal, keep his phone close. When Sylvia talked about the evaluation or the farm or the attorney, he was to record the conversation. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. If you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it. Floyd had confirmed that. Clifton asked, "What are we building toward, court?" I said, "We do this right or we don't do it at all." He nodded. He went back inside. I kept working on the fitting. Over the next 9 days, Clifton recorded 4 conversations. In the first one, Sylvia walked him through how Dr. Decker's evaluations worked. She explained it the way you'd explain a process to a new employee. He asks questions that sound neutral, but the way they're structured, the answers always point toward confusion. It's not a fair test. That's the point. She said it without any hesitation at all. In the second recording, she told him that once guardianship was granted, engineers keep records. She laid out her strategy. First, she would arrange independent medical evaluations before Sylvia ever filed a petition, not one evaluation, 3. A neuropsychologist, a geriatric psychiatrist with no connection to Dr. Decker, and my own family doctor, Harriet Dunmore, who had been tracking my health for 15 years. Get the medical record established and airtight before the other side could put their version into the system. Second, we would let Sylvia file. We would not tip our hand. We would let her believe everything was going according to her plan while we finished building ours. Third, when the time came, we would not just defend, we would counter with elder financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud, and witness manipulation. The district attorney's office would get a copy of everything the same day we filed. I asked Nadine what she thought our chances were. She said, "With this evidence, they'll likely try to withdraw before trial. If they're stubborn enough to go forward, you win at 100%. I drove home that afternoon and did something that felt strange at the time. I started making deliberate small mistakes in public. Not anything serious, just enough to feed the story Sylvia was building. At Gerald Owen's feed store, I took a little too long counting out change for a sack of mineral supplement. Counted it twice, looked uncertain, had to start over. Gerald has been doing business with me for 25 years. I told him what I was doing ahead of time, and he played along without missing a beat. He's a good man. Word got back to Sylvia within 2 days. Small town, she heard through someone at the hardware store that I had seemed off, not quite myself. I know because Clifton recorded her reaction. She was pleased. She told Clifton the timing was working out perfectly, and they needed to push the attorney to move the filing date up. That was exactly what I needed. An accelerating opponent makes more mistakes than a patient one. Around this same time, Howard Beckett called me with something new. Sylvia had approached him directly. She had stopped by his property on a Thursday morning, said she was in the area and wanted to check in on him, asked how he was managing things on his own. Howard said she had a particular way of asking questions, the kind that assumed the answer before you gave it. It must be hard keeping track of everything yourself at your age. Have you thought about getting some help with the finances? Howard had said he was doing fine, and she had smiled and said she was sure he was. Howard told me her visit had lasted 22 minutes. He had recorded every word of it on his phone. That recording was added to the file. Clifton got the fourth and most important recording on a Sunday evening. Sylvia did not know he was still in the house. She was on a call in the bedroom with the door mostly closed, but not fully. Clifton stood in the hallway and let his phone run. She was talking to whoever her attorney was. Laying out the timeline. Evaluation complete by the end of the month. Petition filed the first week of November. Hearing within 45 days of filing, she said the farm appraisal came back at $2 and $4 million, including the equipment leases. Once we have control of the trust, distribution is entirely at our discretion. Then she said, he has no idea any of this is coming. Clifton sent me the file that night. I listened to it twice, wrote down the key time stamps in the notebook, and texted Nadine. Her reply came back inside 10 minutes. That's the one we needed. I'm filing the counter the same day they file. The 3 medical evaluations came back over the following week. All 3 doctors said the same thing in different language: full cognitive function, sharp decision-making, no evidence of any decline. Dr. Harriet Dunmore, who had been my physician for 15 years, wrote in her report that my cognitive performance was consistent with a man 10 to 15 years younger than my actual age. She also noted that my blood pressure, cardiac function, and overall physical health placed me well above average for my age group. Dr. Decker had been paid $12,000 to find the opposite of what 3 independent specialists found for free. Nadine put all 6 reports into a single exhibit file. Then she set it aside and waited for Sylvia to move. The petition came in on a Wednesday morning. Nadine had our counterfiling ready by Thursday. Elder financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud, witness manipulation through a coordinated campaign to establish false narrative of cognitive decline. The district attorney's office received a full copy the same afternoon. The hearing was set for a Thursday 3 weeks out. I went home, fed the cattle, checked the south fence line, and wrote the date in the notebook. The courthouse in town is a plain brick building that has been there since 1962. I have walked past it 100 times without thinking much about it. Walking through the front doors that Thursday morning was different. I had my notebook in my jacket pocket. Nadine was beside me carrying 2 binders and a hard drive. Clifton walked in behind us without saying a word. Judge Carolyn Voss had been on the bench for 22 years. Nadine had told me the night before that Voss had a reputation for reading a case fast and not having much patience for people who wasted her time. That reputation was about to matter more than Sylvia understood. Sylvia's attorney was a woman named Winifred Lane. Expensive suit, prepared manner, the look of someone who had handled a lot of these cases and expected this one to follow the same path as the others. Sylvia sat behind her at the petitioner's table. She was dressed conservatively, expression composed the picture of a concerned daughter-in-law doing a difficult but necessary thing. She did not look at me when I came in. Winifred Lane gave her opening statement. She painted a careful picture. Leonard Whitfield, 67, a hard-working man, but showing troubling signs of decline. Memory lapses, confusion about dates, a family concerned about his safety and his future. She said the petition had been filed out of love, not self-interest. She said the family only wanted to make sure I received proper care before something went wrong. It was professional, it was polished. If I had not known the truth, I might have found some of it convincing. Dr. Philip Decker took the stand first. He had his notes, his clinical language, his wire-rimmed glasses. He described the evaluation he had conducted and his findings. Significant cognitive decline. Memory deficits, impaired judgment around financial matters, disorientation regarding time and dates. He recommended full guardianship and supervised living arrangements. He spoke for 22 minutes. He never once mentioned that he had met with Sylvia 3 times before the evaluation was ever scheduled. He never mentioned the $12,000. Then Winifred Lane called Clifton to the stand. Clifton walked up, was sworn in, and sat down. Winifred handed him a single sheet of paper, his prepared statement, the one Sylvia had written with him over 2 evenings at their kitchen table, while his phone sat in his shirt pocket recording every word of the process. He looked at the paper for a moment, then he set it down on the railing in front of him and said, "I can't read this. It isn't true." The room shifted. Winifred Lane was on her feet. Sylvia's composure broke for the first time, just a flicker, but I saw it. Judge Voss held up one hand and the room went quiet. She looked at Clifton and said, "Explain yourself." Clifton told the court what he knew. He described the conversation where Sylvia had walked him through how Dr. Decker's evaluations worked, how the questions were structured to produce a predetermined result. He described finding out that $22,000 had been moved from their joint savings account without his knowledge. He described the recording from the Sunday evening when he stood in the hallway and heard his wife explain to her attorney that once the trust was under their control, distribution would be entirely at their discretion. Then Nadine stood and asked the court's permission to play the recordings. Judge Voss granted it. The first recording played through the courtroom speakers. Sylvia's voice, clear and even, explaining that Dr. Decker's tests were not designed to be fair, that the point was the outcome, not the accuracy. The second recording, Clifton's question about what happened to the farm after guardianship. Sylvia's answer, patient and detailed, about controlling the trust and the timeline of asset distribution. The third, her voice on the phone with the attorney. The farm appraisal, the filing schedule. He has no idea any of this is coming. When the third recording ended, the courtroom was very quiet. Nadine presented the 6 independent medical reports. She called Dr. Harriet Dunmore, who testified that my cognitive function was consistent with a man significantly younger than 67 and that she had seen no evidence of decline across 15 years of documented medical history. She called Loretta Finch, who had been buying equipment from my leasing operation for 11 years, and testified that I had negotiated contract terms with her 2 months prior with complete precision and no confusion. She called Gerald Owens, who told the court about the deliberate performance at his counter and confirmed it had been coordinated with me in advance. Then she called Howard Beckett. Howard walked to the stand slowly, the way a man does when he has thought carefully about every word he is about to say. He described Sylvia's visit to his property, the 22-minute conversation, the pattern of questions that assumed the answer. He played his recording of that visit. Then he told the court that Sylvia and his own daughter-in-law were connected through a shared online group, that the same approach had been applied to him, and that he had documentation showing his daughter-in-law had consulted with the same attorney Sylvia was using. 2 fathers, 2 properties, 1 coordinated plan. Judge Voss took off her reading glasses and looked at the petitioner's table for a long moment. Then she looked at Winifred Lane and said, "Counsel, were you aware of any of this?" Winifred said she had been provided information she believed to be accurate and had no knowledge of the recordings or the payments to Dr. Decker. Judge Voss nodded once and turned to Sylvia. Judge Voss did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She said, "I have presided over guardianship cases for 22 years. Some of them are legitimate families trying to protect a parent who genuinely cannot protect himself. This is not one of those cases." She dismissed both guardianship petitions. She referred the matter to the district attorney for investigation of elder financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud, and witness manipulation. She ordered Sylvia to have no contact with me or Howard Beckett pending the outcome of that investigation. She directed that Dr. Philip Decker's evaluation be struck from the record entirely and forwarded his file to the state medical board. Then she said something I have thought about more than once since that day. She looked at Clifton and said, "Your father is fortunate. Not every family has someone willing to choose truth when it costs them something. You did. That matters." Clifton did not say anything. He just nodded. We walked out of the courthouse into a cold November morning. Nadine shook my hand and said she would be in touch about the DA process. Howard stood beside me on the courthouse steps for a minute without saying much. Then he said, "I didn't think it would actually work. I told him it worked because we did it right." Sylvia was arrested at her attorney's office 11 days after the hearing. The DA moved fast once the recordings were in hand. She took a plea agreement. 4 years, plus full restitution of all legal costs incurred by me and Howard. The $22,000 she had moved from the joint account was ordered returned to Clifton immediately. Dr. Decker's case went to the medical board, and Floyd told me 3 weeks later that 2 other families had already come forward with similar complaints against him. Howard's situation resolved without a separate trial. Once the connection between Sylvia and his daughter-in-law was documented and submitted to the DA, the power of attorney pressure stopped entirely. Howard told me his son had filed for divorce. I didn't ask for details. That was his family's business to work through. Clifton moved out of the house he had shared with Sylvia the week after the hearing. He didn't ask me what I thought he should do. I didn't offer any opinions. He's 40 years old and he has to make his own decisions. What I know is that he shows up at the farm most Saturdays now. We work on equipment together, go over the leasing contracts, talk about whether the south field needs reseeding. We don't talk about Sylvia. We don't need to. Patricia drove up the following month with 2 suitcases. She's still teaching, doing it remotely now, and she has been helping me move 31 years of farm records onto a proper digital system. Norma would have found that amusing. She always said I was about 15 years behind on technology, and she was right about most things. Howard and I have coffee together most weeks. We have been talking to 3 other men in the county who reached out after word got around about the case. Different situations, same general shape. Somebody deciding that an older man living alone on valuable property is an opportunity rather than a person. We are putting together a resource guide, something practical, so the next man who hears a voice through a window knows exactly what steps to take and who to call. On the first cold evening of December, I sat on the porch and watched the light go out over the south field. The farm was quiet the way it gets in winter, just the sound of the wind through the tree line and the cattle settling in for the night. I had the engineering notebook in my lap. I opened it to the first page, the one Norma wrote on before she handed it to me all those years ago. Small, careful handwriting. Always document everything, Lynn. She was a school teacher. She understood that the best thing you can give somebody is the knowledge to protect themselves. I'm 67 years old. I built this farm from open ground. I raised 2 kids, buried my wife, and kept 220 acres running through drought years and bad markets and every kind of hard thing that rural Tennessee can produce. Sylvia thought my age made me a soft target. What she did not account for was 40 years of engineering work, where the job is to find the flaw in the plan before the plan finds you. Ask her how that worked out. If any part of this story sounds familiar, here's what I want you to take away. Do not wait until you're already in trouble to start protecting yourself. Document your finances, your medical records, your daily decisions. Build relationships with people in your community who can speak to your competence. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling and start asking questions before the other side gets a head start on you. You do not have to be confrontational. You just have to be thorough. I'm living proof that a patient man with a notebook and the right people in his corner can outlast just about anything. If this story helped you, share it with someone who might need it. And if you're facing something similar right now, know that the law is on your side when you give it something solid to work with.